Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to session 68 of our ZoomIN, our virtual get-together. There are almost 40 people here, so we are delighted to welcome you this evening on our ZoomIN. Today's ZoomIN is special. We have a homegrown urban ecologist, Valaris, with us, who is going to educate us about the birds, bees, butterflies, the trees, the type of trees, and how these trees act as an attraction for all the birds, bees, and butterflies. How these are important indicators of a healthy environment and a healthy ecosystem, and the role that they play in creating one. Before we start our session this evening, I would request the Vice President, Mr. Ahluwalia, to please say a few words and welcome Valaris. Mr. Ahluwalia.
Good evening, all of you. Nice to see Valaris doing a fine job. As a matter of fact, she has been teaching us also how to look after our garden. So I'm sure
Wonderful.
that she's a very excellent teacher. You're welcome, Valaris. God bless you. Please. Okay, Sanjana,
Okay.
you take over.
Thank you, Uncle. Valaris, as I said, is a Vasant Vihar native. She, like many of us, I will start again since there was a little break there. Valaris, as I said, is a Vasant Vihar native. She, like many of us, has been a witness to the environmental destruction brought on about unregulated growth and expansion of Delhi over the past 2 decades. This prompted her to take up an advanced studies in urban ecology, and she is currently doing her PhD from North Carolina State University in the US. And the topic of her research is the trees of Delhi from the ecological and socio-cultural perspective. Very interesting, Valaris. Hope to hear a little bit more about this topic. In an effort to create an awareness and to understand the ecology of the neighborhood, Valaris undertook the daunting task of preparing the census of the tree in Vasant Vihar. Again, something which we will find out a little bit more during the course of our talk today. Her dream of a green city where birds, butterflies, trees, plants, wild animals, and humans can coexist and cohabit in harmony. That is her dream. And we can all say amen to that, because I think that is the way forward. So Valaris, welcome to our ZoomIN this evening. And we are delighted to say that since you are from Vasant Vihar, a great opportunity for us to learn from you. And you are younger than most of the audience here, but as they say, young doesn't mean that, you can't teach the older people or the elders. And here the elders are going to learn something from you. So let's begin the session by telling us why the birds, the bees, the butterflies, and the trees that are around us in our gardens, on our street, in our parks, why are they so important? What do they signify?
So first of all, thank you for having me here. Thank you to all of you. And this is definitely like not a teaching session. I'm just sharing what I have learned. I'm just sharing my experiences.
Wonderful.
And for me, like I mentioned, I think we are all very, very lucky to be living in Vasant Vihar. For those of us who've lived here for many years or who've grown up here, because this is definitely one of the greener parts of the city still, even amongst all the changes that we've been seeing and experiencing over the last 2 decades. I mean, a lot has changed in Vasant Vihar as well. And I'll talk about it.
We are very fortunate to have so many parks in and around in the entire neighborhood.
Yes, and so I think first of all, we really need to have deep gratitude for that. That we live in such a beautiful area, and then we must think of coexistence instead of always having competing with nature, right? And I think that is the only way to enhance our environment and make it more livable, or continue to have it as a livable environment, as our cities grow and expand, especially Delhi, as it has grown and it's growing, and we are seeing this rapid expansion, and we still want to be able to live healthy lives in the city. And so coming to your question about the birds and bees, I mean, they are all indicators of a healthy ecosystem. So when I say an ecosystem, I mean this, it's this, the system that is formed by all the living and non-living organisms together. So all the plants, the birds, the animals, the insects, they're all the living components, and humans, of course. And we interact with our air, with soil, with water in various ways. And together, this forms a living, breathing system, which makes it possible for life to coexist. So birds are actually a great indicator of a healthy ecosystem, because many birds are very, very sensitive to small changes in the environment. And so if we want to understand if our environment is healthy, we often take up, or scientists or researchers often study birds, because it gives a good indication of the environment we are living in. And even more sensitive than birds are butterflies. They're very such beautiful creatures, but so sensitive. Even small changes in pollution levels, in temperature, in climate regimes can impact butterflies. And so just having them all around us is not only an indicator of a good, healthy ecosystem, but I think more than that, in our we live in cities and we live in very, very stressful environments. And just having these around us is great for our health, for our mental, physical, our emotional health. And, I can say, yes, there are studies that, that have proven that, but we don't need studies to prove that. I mean, you are feeling stressful, just go and walk around in a park and you will feel better. Nobody needs to prove it to you.
Right.
But it has, at the same time, it has been proven that people who live near green spaces, or who live in areas which have higher bird diversities, actually are healthier. They have low stress levels. They are physically and emotionally healthier. So, and finally, why should humans be the only ones existing in a city or living in a city? I mean, we got here much later than all the plants and animals. So I think they deserve to coexist here with us. Actually, we need to coexist with them. They were already here.
Right. I know when the first lockdown happened, and when it was really quiet, one could see the difference in the environment around, where people started noticing the sound of birds and seeing more butterflies. I mean, there were two things. One, because the activities were less, and one had the opportunity to just spend time, looking out of the window and listening to different sounds and beautiful butterflies. But a lot of people took on gardening as a way of, releasing stress, something which you're talking about, and as you know, in Vasant Vihar, we have lots of people who are fortunate to have gardens and who are fortunate to have terrace gardens or even balconies. So that way, I think, like you rightly said, we are fortunate that we live around a relatively greener space. Um, how can we enhance the greenery around? I mean, I introduced you as a native of Vasant Vihar, right? So tell us, what does native trees mean, and how can we encourage the growth of native trees? Why is it important to have native trees around us?
So when we talk of native plants or native animals, what we mean is those plants and animals that have evolved, that are not only indigenous to this area. So they are not just locally found, but they have evolved over, thousands of years, uh, and are perfectly adapted to the environmental conditions in which they are found. So for example, if we talk about native trees of Delhi, and we know that Delhi is situated in an area which gets rainfall for just 3 months of the year, and the rest of the year is dry. So all the plants that are native to Delhi are adapted to that. They are adapted to survive with just 3 months of rainfall and 9 months of dryness. So they are very hardy. When we bring in plants, for example, from other areas which require more water, then what happens is we have to keep taking care of them. We have to keep watering them. We have to provide so many more resources to make them survive. And if we just plant native trees or native plants, we wouldn't have to do that because they are automatically adapted to this kind of seasonality, the weather, the climate, the water availability, the kind of soil we have. So a large part of Delhi is part of the Aravalli mountains, and the Aravalis,
That's
as
right.
many people might know, they're the oldest mountain range in the world. So they're older than the Himalayas, the oldest. And now they are low hills because they've worn down over time. The Aravalis have very specific plant communities that grow on it, that are adapted to the kind of soil that is found there and to the water availability that is there. The Aravalis are also very rocky. So, you have to have different, when we have plant communities, there will be some that can grow easily in the rocks and then make space where other plants can come up. So basically, when we talk about natives, we have to think about what is the most suited for the place we are living in, what has evolved for this kind of space, for this geography, for this climate, for this soil. And it works the best if we plant natives, if we are talking of planting or even forest regeneration or restoration, because they require the least care. They grow very, they'll grow on their own. They'll take care of themselves. You don't need to take care of them.
Okay.
So
I'm sure you will. I mean, later on we'll ask you which are some of the native trees and how we can plant them. Um, let's talk about the tree census which you did. What was the reason for doing that? What was the learning? And what does it mean for our neighborhood?
So, I would, can I share my screen? I think I would love to.
Sure. 1 second.
Okay, yes, I think I can share it.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, so I just wanted to share this. This is, I and my friend Aditi, who is also from Vasant Vihar, we initiated this tree census along with the RWA in 2015. And the idea was to have a database of all the street trees we have. And why only street trees? Because they are the ones which are least protected, and they are the ones which disappear overnight. So, trees inside our houses or our parks are relatively safe and well cared for and taken care of. But like we talked about it, we have seen a lot of changes, not just in Delhi, but even in Vasant Vihar. And one of the changes has been the new houses that are coming up, the new builder houses that are coming up. And with the kind of building bylaws that have been proposed and formed and brought into being, we are actually losing a lot of street trees. And a lot of it happens illegally without proper permissions. And I think one of the main ideas of the tree census was to make a database which would help us to keep track of our trees. And not only that, we can understand what are the kind of trees we have around us. We can understand what is the health condition of the trees. And we can understand, how do we go about preserving and protecting them. And another goal of the tree census was to create awareness and to help citizens, residents of Vasant Vihar, connect with nature around them. Street trees are the best for it, because most of us usually have a tree in front of our houses. We may not have a park right in front, but most of us have a tree in that we engage with every day. And to kind of create an atmosphere where we can engage with that tree, with nature every day, so that it is in our psyche, right? So that we don't completely ignore it. So we did this tree census, and we had many children and residents joining in. Sorry, I'm just going to show this. So this is just, some of the children and residents who came together for the tree census. And we also found, I just want to go to some of the learnings that we had. We documented over 5,000 trees in our database. So that is just all the street trees. And we found
trees.
More than 5,000. More than 5,000 actually.
Wonderful.
At that time. At that
Right.
time, I think it's gone down since then, because we've lost a fair number of these trees. And this is just the street trees. So I'm not talking about trees in private properties or even inside parks, just the street trees. We found trees of 90, at least 92 different types of trees. There were more. We couldn't identify some of them actually. And but what we found was that only about 27% of all the trees were either native or naturalized. And we just spoke about native plants, right? So majority of the trees in our neighborhood are actually exotic species. And some of them do very well. I'm not saying they're not good. Some of them actually do very well. They've adapted to our climates as well. But I think this kind of gives us an indication that we are missing a lot of native trees from the treescape in our neighborhood. We don't have them at all. A lot of trees that would have been found here, a lot of trees that would have been here when Vasant Vihar originally came up, right? A lot of trees that would have been on the ridge are no longer found here. And this is something that happens in urban systems across the world, because what trees and plants are planted in urban systems, it is really defined by people's choices, by social and cultural practices. And even, policies and politics can also play a role in, what is being planted and not planted. So that's unlike a forest where it's only, biogeographical factors or just nature playing a role. In urban systems, you have so many other components that are coming together. So we found this. We had over 5,000 trees. But one of the things we found was that most of our trees, or a large percentage of our trees, were actually unhealthy. So almost 1/3 of our trees were not doing very well, even at that time. About 800 trees had termite infestations. And, but the main learning was that close to 4,000 trees were choking. They had concrete poured into them at their base, which does not allow the roots to breathe. So a tree breathes in through its roots, just like we breathe in through our noses. The tree breathes in through its roots, and the roots need to have air and water access to air and water so that the tree can stay alive. So if we pour concrete in our trees like this, it is going to kill the tree. It's a very slow process, so we don't see it. And this is why trees fall. Trees don't fall because they are tall. The tall trees don't need to be cut back because they are tall. Trees mostly fall because we have damaged them in some way or the other, or they are infected. There might be termite infestations, or we have, hacked and lopped it, which become entry points for pathogens, or it destabilizes the tree and it becomes prone to falling. So this was one of the major things we found, that most trees were being choked. So it's literally like you are choking. That is how the trees feel. We have to understand that it's a living, breathing, entity. It is not a non-living thing. So it is being choked.
Right. I mean, if you're saying out of 5,000 trees, 4,000 trees are choking, I mean, that's a very high percentage.
That's really terrible. And since then, at that time when we did the census, a lot of trees that were outside residents' houses were choking. And those also on our main roads, Purvi Marg, Pashchimi Marg, etc., were choking. But since then, I think last year, some of the agencies came and they removed the concrete around some of the trees, not all. And wherever actually residents have poured concrete or have tiled and cemented the trees, the authorities didn't touch it. So I don't know why they did not do that, but actually there is a law that says that you cannot have anything within 1 meter radius of a tree. You need to leave it empty. You need to have good earth, soil, manure over there. You need to take care. And the law doesn't say you need to take care of the tree. That is something that should come from our own selves, right? We should take care of the trees that are around us, because they are doing so much for us without even asking. When we were doing the tree census, so many children used to come, and they were so shocked when they saw this. They always used to tell me, दीदी लोग पेड़ क्यों काटते हैं, ऐसा क्यों किया है उन्होंने, पेड़ तो हमें ऑक्सीजन देता है. And it just suddenly struck me that, even though maybe this is a lesson that we are teaching in schools, or we have been taught in schools, it's almost as if we have forgotten it, because as grown-ups and adults, we don't think about it. I think even for a moment, even I did not think about that fact that, trees give oxygen. I had internalized it, that I didn't think I needed to specify it. I needed to say it out aloud. But when we were doing the census, I realized I need to say it, because most of us have forgotten that very, very simple thing.
That's what I said. We have to learn from you and young people, because we've internalized it and we've forgotten about it. But I think as a community, I mean, I did not know that out of 5,000, 4,000 trees are choking. We really do need to take a very proactive step to ensure that we are looking after these trees. And I'm sure many people who are part of the audience would like to be part of this effort. So maybe that's something which can be an outcome of the talk which we are having today.
Yes, I mean, one of the ways to take the tree census forward and to understand what we've done is, if that's something that an idea that I came up with that time, if we could all just adopt the trees in front of our houses. And that's such a simple thing to do. So make sure the tree in front of your house is healthy. So it's maybe 1 or 2 trees at the most. It's not going to take too many resources or too much of your time. It is just a change in the attitude, right? So make sure it is deconcretized, make sure it's not choking, put some good earth in it. And Rampal ji in the MCD nursery over here, I spoke to him yesterday. He said कि आप खाद मुझसे ले लेना पेड़ में डालने के लिए, मैं दे दूंगा. So he has खाद and manure. which he will give.
Wonderful.
So
Mhm.
please go and take it from him, put it in the tree in front of your house, make sure you water it, take care of it. It is going to do so much for you. And if
That's
if
true.
it has termite infestations or some other infection or disease, we first need to see if it can be treated. We should not, uh, one of the first thought that many people have is, isko to kaat dena chahiye. But that is not the way to go. Let us take a look at it and see if it can be saved.
Mhm.
If only if it is beyond saving, we should remove it, but we should plant another tree in that space. That's one of the reasons why we are losing so many trees in Vasant Vihar, because a lot of trees have been removed, but nothing has been planted over there. So it cannot become your parking spot. It has to be space for a tree. That space outside the house, it is public space, and I think one of the best use, it is a pedestrian walkway, and we need to, that is one of the best spaces where we can enhance greenery. That's another thing you'd asked, how do we increase greenery? We already have very, very green parks. We actually don't have space to plant anything in our parks now. We are
Right.
losing our greenery because we are losing the gardens in our houses, the gardens
Mhm.
and trees, and we are losing the street trees. So that is where we can take a call on, what to do. We can think of solutions over there. And so if a tree is removed for any reason, if it is legally removed, we can replace it with a new tree, with a good tree. And then we can pick up one of these native trees that we don't have and,
Right.
brag about it as well.
Okay. Good idea. There's something which you touched upon earlier, termites. That is a source of concern for many residents, like you rightly said. How does one deal with a tree which is infected with termite?
So if it is just the beginning of infestation, there are ways to treat it for sure.
How do you know that it's the infection has just started, or is it a deep-rooted infection? How does one know that? Do you need to get experts to look at it?
Yes, we need to get
Okay.
experts. So maybe some
Mm,
a horticulturist. And I know a lot of people have this question. So I will find out the right resource and I will share it with you. I did have
that would be
somebody's
wonderful.
contact a few years back. And I
Mm-hmm.
know one of the residents used it to save the tree in front of their house. They were able to
Mm-hmm.
come and treat the tree and
Mm,
do whatever was needed to save it. So it is possible. It is absolutely possible.
wonderful.
An expert needs to see it, and we can compile a list of such experts who would be willing to do it. The other thing is, the MCD is supposed to have a tree ambulance. That is again something that's written in the guidelines and laws and policies of Delhi. So we should be pushing them towards having this, because the NDMC has a tree ambulance and they do go and treat all the trees in NDMC areas. So they have the expertise, they have the knowledge. Maybe it's a matter of willingness. So I think if we push them for it, we can get a tree ambulance. And basically, the tree ambulance would be equipped with all the things that would be needed to treat a tree.
I don't know if many of the people who are there in the audience even knew about this fact that there is supposed to be a tree ambulance. I mean, I
Yes.
certainly did not know. So, a new learning again, learning something new from you, Valerie.
So,
Um,
let's push our MCD to get the tree ambulance because we need it.
yeah, sure. I think again, if it is for the benefit of the entire neighborhood, it's not just for one or two people. So I think
So
that is
I
something we
I
can.
would actually request Valerie to take initiative on this and maybe with the help of VVWA push SDMC for this tree ambulance.
I think it's something which we certainly need to look into very seriously. When you were doing the tree census, were you able to determine the age of the trees which we have in the colony?
See, determining the age of a tree, the only accurate way of doing it is by taking a core sample from the tree. So there is a drill that comes and you put it in and you take out a sample, and then you have to count the number of rings, right? That's the
Right.
only way to do it. Otherwise,
Mhm.
different trees have, they have different growth rates. We can determine the age approximately by understanding what species it is and what its usual growth rate is. But I
Mhm.
think that would be such an approximate determination that's not possible. But just
Okay.
looking at the girth and the height of trees, you can get some
Mhm.
idea. And I would say that most of our trees were at least 20, 30, even 40, 50 years old. And so I started speaking to some of the residents and I asked them, when
Right.
were these trees planted? And
Mhm.
and if anybody has stories to share, I am happy to listen. I'm always collecting stories. I want to know.
Mhm.
But I was told by some of the older residents that, when they'd come here in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was still bare land. And maybe between the 70s and 80s, the authorities also planted trees, and a lot of residents also contributed. And many of our residents have planted trees themselves. So many of our trees are actually older trees. I think the only younger trees that we found were or a large number of the ashok trees that many people plant right outside the boundary wall. Otherwise, I think most of our trees are actually at least between 30 to 40 years old.
And is a Ashok tree a native to
No.
the neighborhood? It's not.
No, Ashok is
Okay.
not a native tree. Ashok is
Okay.
not native to India.
Really, not even to
Yeah,
India.
no.
Okay. Maybe another session about where the origins of Ashok tree is and why is
Yeah,
it not a native.
I think it's native to South Sri Lanka or something. I'm kind of forgetting that, so I will not commit on that right
Sure,
now
sure,
until I
sure.
check it. But
Right.
it's not native.
Sure. Another thing which lot of people talk about is planting herbal trees. Is that something which one should do actively, or is it something which should be done in, specific areas?
I think when we plant trees or plants, there is always some thought behind it, if we want to plant something. So some of
Mm-hmm.
us may want some fruit, maybe we like some flower, maybe it's medicinal in some way. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's good. I think there must be a reason to plant a tree rather than just doing it randomly. And
Mm-hmm.
it creates a stronger connection with what you're doing. And you mentioned that is the other part of my PhD, where I'm looking at these socio-cultural interactions. Why do
Mm-hmm.
people plant certain trees or prefer certain trees, don't like other trees? What is going on in our heads, when we are thinking of
Right.
trees or plants or plantation?
Okay.
What I would like to say here is, even whatever we are planting, let us think about whether it is suitable to our environment or not. So, for example, one of the trees, for example, Palash. Palash is a native tree of this area. It's a beautiful tree. It's an amazingly beautiful tree. We just don't have it here. And Palash is the one whose flowers are used during Holi, right? So it has uh, some human, I mean, we have some uses for that tree as well. That would be a great tree to plant.
Mm-hmm.
We can think of trees like Avla, Bahed, and I think they do, if I'm not wrong, they also do well. They do well in the, in our climate in Delhi. And so those are good trees to plant as well. In fact, I have this book. I'll send you the link. It's called 100 Most Suitable Trees for Delhi, which was compiled by Pradeep Krishan, who's actually taught us everything about trees there is to know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a sample of, all the trees that would do well over here. And if you look at it, you'll find a lot of fruit trees, you'll find a lot of flowering trees, you will find a lot of these trees where we use, some part of the tree. So whether it's Arjun, whether it's Bahir, whether it's Avla, and I think it's good. We should plant them wherever we get the space, or whenever we are planting, we should think about them.
That's true. Um, I mean, again, something which you touch upon is, fruit trees. One doesn't see many fruit trees as one did in the past. Most of the fruit trees have been chopped off from the neighborhood. Um, I mean, why do you think we don't actively plant fruit trees? Do they need a lot of looking after?
No, they don't need a lot of looking after. I think it's really sad. I've spoken to a lot of people, including those in government authorities, and they have this idea that if we will plant fruit trees, then children will climb them and children would like the fruit. And I said, but what's wrong in that? Haven't you done that in your
Mm-hmm.
childhood? I've done it in my childhood. I've gone to
Mm-hmm.
shehtood trees and, shook the tree and collected shehtood. That's part of being a child, and that's part of connecting with nature. So
Mm-hmm.
having done that, we don't want the children now to be able to do it. Then that is really, really wrong. That's really terrible. So fruit
Mm-hmm.
trees don't need extra looking after at all. It is just our attitude that has changed towards them. And I think we need to think about it, because fruit trees are very, very important for our ecosystems, for biodiversity. But also, what is wrong in wanting to climb a tree? I don't understand. I would love to climb a tree. There are people who do tree climbing sessions now, and you have to pay for it and go somewhere out and do it. Why not do it
Mm-hmm.
right here? And the
You may even
fun of
get an
it,
Olympic medal for
I
that.
know, and the fun of it, the fun of, getting
The
jamun from
joy.
a tree and eating that, that is more
Even
valuable
amrut
than
from a tree.
buying. Yeah, that is more valuable than buying jamun from the supermarket or the the phal wala, right? Why are we
Mm-hmm.
denying children this right? Why are we denying them this opportunity? And it is only the refusal to plant fruit trees is only because children will break the fruits, and the other is because fruits fall and we don't like it. And so I have just one response for that. We are living, breathing organisms. Even we, our hair falls all the time. Should we shave off
Mm-hmm.
our heads? Because we have to learn to, this is creating a very antagonistic attitude towards nature, that we don't want anything. We want everything to be absolutely sanitized and sterilized. We don't want any leaves. We don't want any fruits. We don't want any flowers. But that's not how nature works.
Sure.
So we have to
That's
give it a little bit of thought and think about, why are we saying this? And, is it right? Maybe we need to change the way we are thinking.
I think we certainly need to reflect upon, all these little things which you are highlighting, about whether it's the tree ambulance, whether it's planting fruit trees, whether it is, you know, constituting a small little group who will look after the trees and preserve the trees which we have, and take care of them. Um, Moving on, we often hear a term, nature is in lockdown. What do you mean? I mean, what does it mean to, when do we use this term that nature is in lockdown?
Nature is in lockdown or doesn't
Or
lockdown?
nature in the lockdown?
Nature in the lockdown. I'm going to share
Sorry.
that with you.
Okay.
Um, so let's go here. So I want to share my experience of nature in the lockdown. I think last year when we went into lockdown, maybe that's the first time that all of us experienced, something like that. Like the word lockdown did not even exist before that.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
what happened? What happened was that humans retreated inside. So we went inside our houses, we stopped traveling, we stopped industrial activity, we retreated in, and then nature had a field day. Nature said, wow, this is amazing. This is great.
Okay.
I don't have to deal with pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, water pollution. This is absolutely lovely. And nature does, it kept doing what it does, plants and seasons did not stop, seasons kept changing as they were. The plants and animals did what they're doing. But we have examples from all over the world about plants, not plants specifically, but animals taking advantage of the fact that people were all indoors. So for example, in some reserves in South Africa, where in some resorts in South Africa, the cheetahs were roaming around. They said, wow,
Yes,
this place is
true.
ours. In penguins had a field day in South Africa because they were able to feed more frequently and raise more chicks because there weren't people around to disturb them. So nature was really happy, and nature doesn't go into lockdown because the seasons, the cycles of nature keep moving as they are, whether people are there or not. The seasons will keep changing, the birds and animals will keep doing what they want to. But for us, being in a lockdown, I think we also, of course, there were many challenges for most of us, but we also saw very, very clear skies. And in a city like
That's
Delhi,
true.
that's such a luxury. But
Yeah.
skies cleared up across the world. Noise pollution was down to a minimum. And for me, I think the first or second day of the lockdown, I hear this call and I didn't know what it was. It was so loud and so shrill. And I ran out of the house and I was like, which bird is that? I don't know. And then I discovered it's this one. So maybe many people know about this or maybe not. It's called an Indian white eyes, and it's called a white eyes because it has that white ring around the eye. And it's a really tiny bird, okay? It's really tiny. It's actually very common in our urban areas. But I had never really recognized or heard its call because it was so noisy all the time. And suddenly the noise stopped and you could just
And you
hear
could
all the
hear.
bird calls.
Yes.
It was so magnified. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can hear the call anywhere and everywhere. Sometimes I would hear it on my Zoom calls and I would think, oh, the bird is here. Then I realized, no, it is in somebody else's house. The other
Right.
person who's on that Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
So we had really clear skies, we had clean air, clean water, we had absolutely no noise, and it was so beautiful. We, as you mentioned, we also had time to see and observe nature around us, but nature actually had a field day. And
Yeah.
these are, some of the other birds I saw during the lockdown, which are actually always there, but it was just much more easier to spot them. And there was actually more time to see them. And I also, I discovered this flock of silver bills near the house, which I had never seen earlier because they are grain-eating birds. They are grainivorous birds, and we don't have any space, any grassy spaces left where they can feed. So you don't see them unless, there is a bird feeder. So the birds were going about their business. The rosy starlings, which are migratory birds, which come every year. They pass through Delhi twice a year. They came at their regular time. They went back at their regular time. They were not impacted by the lockdown.
That is so true. Only humans were, in confinement. The nature was having a field day.
Yeah.
Will you tell us a little bit about what the native trees are for Delhi, and when is a good time to plant them? How can we plant them? where can we get that plant from? Could you guide us about that a little bit?
Yes. So, sorry, I'm going to just show you some pictures because I think it's much more easier to see with pictures. Okay. So there are lists of native plants and trees that I would be happy to share, and of course the conversation can continue offline with whoever is interested in this. So just to give you a glimpse, so the tree on the left is the Palash tree that I was talking about earlier. So beautiful tree, it's native to Delhi, and we certainly don't have enough of these in Delhi. This would be a lovely tree to plant even in small spaces because it doesn't grow very big or very tall. So even if you have a smaller space, it can grow and do very, very well. And it's drought hardy, it's drought tolerant, and even if you don't water it much, it will do very well. The tree on the top right corner is a chamrod tree. We have some of these. In the district park, and we have a couple of them in different parks in Vasant Vihar. Again, a native tree of this area. It has these tiny white star-like flowers, which are very beautiful. It flowers in March. And
yeah, it looks beautiful.
And then, it gets these berries. And those berries are an absolute favorite for birds and squirrels. And even you can eat them. They're like sweet and tangy. So that is another great tree to have. Again, it's a smaller tree. It doesn't grow very big. So even if you have a small space, it can grow very well. The third tree, which is on the bottom right corner, is a coral tree. And I just recently learned, I did not know this, that Karol Bagh is actually named after the coral trees because it was called Karol. It became Karol Bagh. Now, I don't know if any of these trees exist there, the coral trees. And again, you can see these beautiful blossoms. It's almost like a palash, but slightly different. And all of these trees are native. They have beautiful flowers. They are drought tolerant. They are hardy. And they are a favorite with birds and butterflies. So what more do you want? This is just a sample. There are others also. Another tree, I don't have a photo here, is a barna tree. Again, it has beautiful white and yellow flowers. And they all flower in spring. So they all flower in March and April. And the really great thing with barna is that it's a winter deciduous tree. So the leaves fall automatically. It's leafless from December to March. So if we are worried about, planting a tree that would block sunlight, you don't need to worry about it because the leaves will fall, you will get your sunlight, then you will get your flowers, and then you will get your shade in summers.
Wow, all into one.
All in one. And again, a beautiful tree with beautiful fragrant flowers.
Okay, so this is a good tree to have in and around your house.
Again, yes, a good tree. And if we talk about some shrubs, so the one on the left is Chitrak, and you can see it has beautiful white flowers. And the one on the right is Vajradanti, which has these yellow flowers. And it's the same Vajradanti, Vico Vajradanti wala Vajradanti. Both native, with beautiful flowers and hardy. And they both attract butterflies. They're a favorite with butterflies. And if you like sunbirds, a lot of sunbirds will come to the Vajradanti as well. And I want to show you, this is actually my favorite, and I think everybody should have this. This is a flowering vine. It's called Valaris, and in Hindi it's called Dudhi Bel, because it has these beautiful, beautiful, fragrant white flowers. and it flowers profusely. And it's the most beautiful flowering vine I have seen.
Were you named after this flower?
Or maybe this was named after me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this is also Vajradanti. It's a Neeli Vajradanti or the blue Vajradanti. And just look at how beautiful that flower is. So these are all native plants. This is a shrub. And native does not mean that they will not be beautiful. Actually, native means they are full of flowers and fruits. They are fragrant. There are herbal plants. Ashwagandha is native, so if you want to plant
Okay.
ashwagandha, that's another great one to have. I just don't know how to use it. I have it in the house, but I don't know what to do with it. So it's there. Plant, all the some of these jasmines, Bela, Chameli, Juhi, they are all natives. We can plant them. They are so fragrant and easy to grow. We don't need to necessarily run after alamanders. I mean, have an alamander if you want one, but you can also have the Bela or a Juhi that, does very well in this area. This is
Can
another
you grow
very...
them? Sorry to interrupt, but can you grow these like Bela Chameli? Can you grow them in pots because, or do they need to be planted on the ground?
You can, all the plants I'm showing you, except for the trees, all the plants that I'm showing you can be grown in pots. The only thing is you need to ensure it has good sunlight, because they will not flower unless there is sunlight, and the size of the pot. So I completely understand, like I mentioned, we, because of these new buildings that are coming up and the building bylaws that we have, we are losing soil space. We no longer have soil. So you can put them in relatively bigger pots, and they will flower well. I have a friend who does native plants, and she has maybe 60, 70 different kinds of native plants on her terrace, all in pots. She even has the trees in pots, just to see how they grow. Not because, trees should go in the ground, but if you don't have that ground space available, you can grow them in pots. And this is another native plant. It's called Arni or Arna. And these photos are from the Biodiversity Park.
Beautiful photos, I must say.
Thank you.
Very, very pretty.
And again, very beautiful flowers, birds and butterflies. Absolutely love it. And, you can grow them in pots at home. Oh, this is another native tree called Ronge. But I'm not going to talk about trees too much right now in these, because I think are we running out of time? Do we want to see other pictures? I don't know.
Yeah.
So this is just a sample, of native plants. There are trees, there are shrubs, there are vines, there are creepers, there are herbal plants, there are medicinal plants. And I would just encourage everyone to think a little outside of the, think a little outside of the box. So think more than what the nursery is giving. Many of these are not available at our regular nurseries, but these are two nurseries, native plant nurseries in Delhi NCR, from where we can get the plants. And again, I would be happy to share these documents and these details with you, so you can pass them on to people.
Sure.
And it's there are many shrubs and trees in it, and based on the kind of space we have, we can decide, what we would like to plant in that space. But definitely focus on creating a habitat rather than just planting randomly. So if you already have certain trees or plants, think about what else you can bring into that space that could enhance that space. And if you have a larger piece of land where you're planting, then it shouldn't just be trees. We must have a mix of grasses and shrubs, trees and vines. And these are available at these nurseries. Some plants are available with me as well, and some other people. Again, the details can be shared with those who are interested.
Thank you for that. We cannot finish a conversation about trees and especially that in the neighborhood without talking about pollution, which you briefly touched upon. Why are trees so directly linked with pollution? I mean, I know you said about oxygen, but is that the only reason why the trees in the neighborhood are so important, or are there other reasons as well?
So I think if you look at the bigger picture, uh,
Mm-hmm.
some of the ways in which I mean trees provide a lot of services, and they're grouped into different kinds of services. So if we get fruits from the tree, it's called a provisional service. But trees provide a lot of environmental services. They sequester carbon. So when we talk about global warming and climate change, and we talk about all the carbon that we are releasing in the atmosphere, uh, old trees actually sequester a lot of carbon. So the protection and preservation of old trees is very important. Um, at every scale, at the local scale, at the local level, at the regional level, at the global level as well. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if we think, oh, we can cut a tree and we'll plant some more, that it doesn't really work like that, right?
Right.
The kind of services that an older tree can provide cannot be provided by saplings, and they will take their time to grow into that majestic old being, to provide that
Mm-hmm.
services. So one is carbon sequestration, and the other is the tree canopy also has the potential to absorb a number of pollutants. And there are studies about this, even in India, where trees have been shown to absorb sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides from the atmosphere. So when we are living in very, very polluted environments, having
Mm-hmm.
trees that can absorb these pollutants can be very beneficial for us, right? And
Absolutely.
oxygen production is obviously one thing. And finally, in cities like Delhi, just imagine how hot it gets, and just living in a greener space with large trees which have large canopies can provide great relief from the heat. That is again the cause of a lot of illnesses, people getting heat strokes, especially people who work on the streets or have to work on the streets. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
the option to live in air conditioned rooms. And if we have street trees, then our electricity requirement also goes down. So we don't have to run the air conditioners so much. So there are and if you run, the more electricity you consume, the more pollutants you are releasing into the atmosphere. So there are so many ways in which trees contribute to reduction of carbon and other pollutants in the atmosphere. But it only works with trees which have large canopies. So planting a bottle palm, which is actually not even native, is not really helpful. It doesn't provide any shade. And it
Mm-hmm.
has very small canopy, which doesn't do anything. So these are also things we need to think about when we are thinking of tree plantation. What is the reason we want to plant trees? What do they provide us? What is the best tree for that? What is the best group of trees for that?
I think we are going to rope you in for a lot of activities here related to trees because this is something which we as a community really need to take seriously. And I mean, happy to say that 2 or 3 years ago we had One Step Greener do the tree plantation next to the district park um, on Paschimi Marg. So, and those trees have done well, and I think maybe we should actively try and um, you know plant more trees. Is this the best time of the year to plant trees, or can you actually plant trees around the year?
I do think this is a good time because then you don't have to water them too much.
Okay.
But I have spoken to other people who are involved in tree plantation. if you have the resources to look after a tree or plant, you can plant it anytime, but you must have the
Okay.
resources to look after it. So you must have, if you're not planting in the monsoons, for example, if you're planting at some other time, you will have to arrange for water. If you don't have water, then monsoons is a great time to plant. And you also have to, when planting, we also have to understand, what are the requirements to nurture the tree. So you will have to take care of a tree or a plant for 1 or 2 years before it can be left on its own. So before planting, take all these factors into account, because this is what happens. We hear of all these programs where thousands, lakhs, millions of trees are planted, but where are they? They don't exist. They're only on paper. So instead
That's
of
true.
that, plant 1 or 2 and just nurture them, make sure they survive. That is much. Plant in your vicinity if possible, because that is where we need plants. It is here that we need our trees and plants. We don't need them, the benefits that a tree will provide here, we will not get those benefits if it's planted 50 kilometers away. So I want to say, if possible, please, if you don't have trees in your house or in front of your house, please make space today and plant there. That is where the tree will give all of us the maximum benefit. We already have, in our parks, we already have a lot of trees, and we might plant, we can plant more, that's okay. But we have to plant trees from where we are losing, and we are losing them from our homes and our streets.
That is true. Especially, the new buildings or the builder flats. Now the new ones don't even have the small patch of green which used
exactly
to be there
before.
But
If I am sure that we have very intelligent designers and architects who can think of ways to have patches. It depends on what we want. So if we want a green patch, and I have seen houses with green patches, I have seen houses where they've retained their trees, they've not damaged them. So it really depends on what we want. So if we can change our attitude towards that, and if we can think a little more inclusively, I think that will be so beneficial for all of us.
Thank you for actually educating us on so many important things, Valerie. You have educated us.
Thank you.
So walk away with that credit.
Okay, thank you. And if people have questions about trees, native trees, etc., I'm feel free to reach out. They can reach out through you, and I will share some resources which you can share with the wider community. That would be beneficial for everyone.
I want to say something.
Going forward, sorry, let me just finish, and then we can take questions. So I think going forward,
I ask one question.
Just 1 minute,
Okay.
just a couple of minutes. So Valerie, I think people want to add to what you have said, but before we get them to talk, I think you've highlighted a couple of very important points and things which can be done simply as well. So it's not like, things are not within our control. Things are within our control, and we need to actively play a role in and take charge of looking after our environment, right? Yes. So thank you very much for being part of our ZoomIN this evening, and we've learned and enjoyed listening you. Please go ahead and ask the questions. I think Anita here wanted to ask the question. After that, Padmaji, you can go ahead. Please go ahead. Anita?
I am Dr. Bela, and Valerie, your talk is real good, excellent. You are doing a good job. But one concern which I want to share with you that you must include in your study also, which is missing probably. I mean, you have, from your talk, I have seen that you have counted 4,993 trees in the Sandhya. I want to ask you, have you counted how many of them are crooked?
So crooked trees are not necessarily like diseased. Crookedness happens, either a tree form can be crooked, so some trees grow crooked.
No, let me say what I want to say. I
Sure.
want to answer from you. I want to suggest you something. I mean, we don't have any deficiency of trees in northern Vasant Vihar, in Delhi also. Delhi is the greenest city capital of the world. Everybody knows about it. We have plenty of trees. But how the trees are growing on the roads, have you seen them? All of that, they are coming on the road. It is difficult to drive a car or to drive a cycle or a motorcycle. The reason is that they are not looked after planting. They are just thrown on the ground by the unskilled laborers, and then they grow the way they want it. And then somebody comes, some house, it is disturbing the house, he will cut a branch. And the canopy is disturbed, and they bend to one side, and then they are uprooted during the rainy season and whenever there's heavy winds. I think rather than planting more, if we have to plant, we have to ensure that they grow erect and they have a space for the canopy. Otherwise, by crowding them, putting the tree, they need a space. How much space a tree needs, that has to be decided, and that distance has to be kept. If that is not kept and they grow the way they are growing, then that's not the way of the plant.
I agree with you, sir. I think when we are planting trees, we need to be, we have to be responsible. I mean, and responsibility includes nurturing them, looking after them, watering them, and ensuring that they grow correctly. I mean,
But
unfortunately, we cannot depend on the government agencies to look after the trees. Sorry,
I just want to add over here, like I said, we don't need to plant thousands. We can plant just one or two and look after them. And the other thing is, I disagree that Delhi is no longer the greenest capital in the world. We have lost thousands of trees and a very large amount of green space over the last 2 decades. Not just Delhi, but other cities in India as well. We do need to create more spaces, and we need to preserve the spaces that we already have. It does not mean that you crowd trees. No, we still have to follow proper planting practices, but we need to, I don't know, how do we create space in a city that is completely overtaken by concrete? But that's what we need to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Valerie. Mrs. Chib, you wanted to say something?
No, I think I have a longish question, and you'll probably give her telephone number. I'll talk to her on that. I think it was a good talk. Let's not sort of extend it like that. I'll ask her a question later.
Okay. We'll just quickly go through the chat box, Valerie, before we finish. What can we do about the monoculture planted by the horticulture department? This is a question from Vinita.
We have to engage with them, and it's hard because everybody has certain ways of doing and thinking, and the government agencies, the horticulture departments have their own ways of doing things, and so we have to engage with them and try and bring in other ways of thinking, bring in other plants so that we can break that monoculture. But that's it. We have to engage with them. So if you know a little more, and if you understand this is a monoculture, you have to go there and say, can we plant something different? And this is a good plant that we can put in there, substitute X for Y, do something like that, work with them to break that monoculture. And of course, there are people working in the background on policy issues and trying to engage at the policy level also. But I think at an individual level, if we have the access and the opportunity, we can do that.
Great. Thank you. Most of the other comments are about how interesting the talk is. So thank you for that.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Please go ahead.
Valerie, this is Veena here. Veena Bhatnagar auntie.
Hello, auntie.
Hi, nice listening to you. But I've seen your passion, for this thing. But I have one question. Like, there are trees sometimes which are growing in areas and their roots are going under pipes or under the wall, etc. And then you're desperate. I mean, you feel criminal cutting the tree, but there is no other way. There doesn't seem to be any other way. Do you have a way around it in your mind or something?
Auntie, if trees are damaging the walls or foundation of a house, then yes, they would have to be removed. Unfortunately, that's the reality of living in urban spaces. But what I suggest is, and the forest department can be contacted for this and they will take the necessary action. What I suggest is, if we remove trees like that, let's plant a smaller tree over there. So not all trees, we are suitable for street sides or to be planted in front of houses. As we mentioned, looking at the space requirement that a tree has, let's plant something, but let's not leave that space empty or give it over to parking. That's all I'm saying. Let's put something else there.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I speak?
Yeah, sure.
Can I speak? Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I am Dr. Geeta Mathur. I am a retired botanist from Gargi College. I was associate professor at Gargi, and I'm very happy to have joined this session because one of my friends sent this link to me, and the reason is that I have studied trees of Delhi at length, I mean, for nearly 4 decades. So offer, Valaris, anything you want to know about trees of Delhi, which will help with your research work, I'm here to help.
That
Anybody
would be
who wants.
so wonderful. So how do I get in touch with you?
Okay, I just get to that. Another thing I want to say is whenever any association is organizing a sapling distribution, first thing, please don't organize any such thing. I'm very strong about it because I know that all these nurseries which I have surveyed over the years are just giving you saplings of trees which grow very fast. They are all jungly trees, those which are actually destroying the natural tree population of Delhi. One of them is what is called Subabul and Kubabul both. There are many such trees and these grow very fast. So all these nursery people, especially government nurseries, they give you truckloads of these free for sapling distribution. Please don't take those and please don't plant those. Be very selective in what you are growing and keep a list of whom you have given what sapling so that you can follow up as to what they have done with that. Don't grow all kinds of odd pie things everywhere. That is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Geeta Mathur, and thank you very much for joining the session this evening and contributing to the session as well. We are delighted to have you talk about the work which you have done and also to guide us and tell us. I mean, that is something, again, what Valaris has been saying, that, don't go for extensive plantation. Just plant a couple of trees and then nurture them and look after them. So thank you very much for highlighting that. Any more questions, ladies, before we close the session? I think Mr. Ahluwalia wanted to say something, and then we will request the president to say a few words. Mr. Ahluwalia, did you want to say something? Is he still here? I don't think he's there. So
hello.
Yeah.
Can I say something? Sujata Madhuk.
Yeah, Sujata, go ahead.
I just hoping that we can get Valaris' number and connect with her directly. Is that okay?
I will share that in the group chat. The club group.
Yeah, great. Okay? Please do. So we can talk about, because I also like growing trees and but they're usually not native. So I would like to talk to her about how to grow
Sure,
native.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
one
great.
of the reasons why we have these ZoomIns. It's to
Yeah,
try and
nice.
create the awareness.
Yeah,
So
great.
I think General Prashad he was here briefly, but I think maybe he's not there. So thank you very much, Valerie, for joining us this evening and for um, taking our blinkers off, helping us take our blinkers off, and you know, in guiding us how to grow native trees, shrubs, plants, and create a nice neighborhood going forward. And also for highlighting some of the things which I have already mentioned, and take your help in doing the same. And I think many of the people who are there, our viewers and our members, would love to join in and support in what you're doing. So we will be in touch with you, and and like you did the tree census, there are many more things which we are going to seek your help in doing for the colony. On that note,
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank you
Valerie.
for having me. And that was exactly, I hope that is the outcome of this, that we can work together as a community to
Right.
enhance and make this space better
Yeah.
than what it is.
And we have to thank Mr. Sharma here, Raj Sharma, for
Yes.
Thank you,
for
Valerie.
organizing the session.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie, so much for joining. I just got to know from my wife that you are a contemporary of my daughter.
Yes, we studied together in
Ah,
nursery.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
it's,
all the
it's, it's great
best.
to see.
And I know
Yeah.
that you do operate in our part of the neighborhood because Vijay Kiawat is an active collaborator in in some of your projects.
Yes, he was a big part in the tree census. He and Auntie did the
Yeah.
entire census for E-Block themselves. And, that's how I got to know him.
Yeah.
And he's been really supportive. But yeah, I just wanted to say if anybody is interested in planting, even in the parks, please do get in touch because we are finalizing a list of these plants that can be planted, and it would be nice to have everybody's involvement in that.
Thank you very much. And we look forward to, thank you, audience, for being part of this session. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, stay safe, stay well, and have a lovely evening. Take
Thank
care.
you
Bye-bye.
and good night, everyone.